Hello and welcome to Disc and Dice. This is episode 35. My name is Tim. With me as always are my co-hosts JT and Paul. How are we doing, fellas?
Hello, everyone. I'm doing great.
I'm also doing great.
Would we ever say anything else? One day, are you going to ask us that and it's just going to be like, nah, doing crap. And then just sort of like unload on you, like just all the things that are wrong in life at the moment?
I really think that's up to you guys, isn't it? It's not up to the asker.
Yeah. I guess this begs the question now. Are we being honest with you?
It's a bit like that, when you go into a store or something like that, and you say like, "How you going?" and no one ever even says good or bad. Usually, if you just say like, "How you going?" and the other person says, "How you going?" and no one actually answers the question.
Yeah.
Like, you know what? Like, we're all, you know how like they say like when you're driving the same route that you've driven every morning for the past like year or whatever, you don't actually see your peripheral visions, like the sides are gone, your brain fills it in. It's like we do that in our day-to-day conversations with conversation, because like I say howdy a lot, and like I would say like, I don't know, 1 out of every 3 times I say howdy, someone goes, "Yeah, not bad, how are you?" I'm like, I literally didn't ask you. like they're just like so used to like the "how are you, how's it going" to start a conversation.
I didn't ask you, Karen.
Yeah, pretty much. Do you want to like dial it back a notch, please?
Is howdy a common thing? Because I also find myself saying it a fair bit. I think I've said it a fair bit on the pod in some of the intros, but I don't think I hear other people say howdy to me.
I don't think it's that common. Like my dad used to say it all the time, and I always just thought it was like my dad's thing, because it's like a funny thing because it was kind of outdated and he still said it. And so now I say it all the time as a result. And like Shayla says it independently of me. I don't know.
I don't think I've ever said howdy. I think that just then is the first time in my
There you
life
go.
that I've said it.
You got to try it out, mate.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's
You know what?
It's just like it condenses all the words you want to say, like "how are you," into just one simple howdy.
Content
Simple.
for the podcast. Trot it out, give it a go, report back with your findings.
Well, it would be useful, seeing as we are Australia's #1 greeting analysis podcast.
Number one and only.
Don't mention that. That's not important.
Number one only, and technically the worst as well.
We got it all covered, whichever angle you want.
So yeah, I guess we should probably tell people that we are a gaming podcast. If you've got to episode 35 and you hadn't figured that out yet, or if you're a first-time listener, we had a.
Are you just assuming that anyone listening to this has listened to the 34 preceding episodes?
Yeah, that's probably is a bit of an assumption, because I don't think any of us have listened to all of those episodes. Yeah. Speaking of sort of episode numbers and stats like that, we did have a small revelation that Timmy brought up before we started recording today, which was that I think this marks the point at which JT has been on more than 50% of the episodes that we have done.
Yeah, it means I officially get paid now by the podcast.
Yeah, you get an equal third of everything we earn. Enjoy
which
it.
is
all at once.
Which is precisely $0. So
Well, actually, what we earn is negative $15 a month.
Oh yeah,
That's true. Yeah.
Well, that's good. It means I'm now, liable for that portion of the money that I owe.
Yeah, I was going to say it means now you can start paying
Yeah.
your share.
Yeah, it means I can't just walk away and be like, nah, I was less than 50% of that, so I basically didn't count. Now you guys can take me to court, and you might have a case against me. So
now we can rip the podcast apart with a lengthy legal battle.
Yeah, looking forward to it, to be honest.
Absolutely, a cause for celebration.
I'm part of it now. Really, truly, madly, deeply.
Yes.
I had to go all out there.
I was going to be right there with you. I was like, if he doesn't finish this.
Timmy's like, I'm going to harmonize that last madly and deeply.
Yeah. Greeting analysis and Darren Hayes appreciation. That's the name of our game.
That's it.
All right. Well, if we let this go on any longer,
Yeah,
it's
I
going to
was
be the
gonna say, that's
longest.
probably enough banter for now.
It's going to be the longest off-topic intro ever. So, to bring it back to what we're actually here to talk about, which is games, of course. What games you guys been playing?
Well, I have tried out the new Animal Crossing game. I believe it's called New Horizons. And in fact, Shayla picked this one up and gave it a play. And so I kind of like nicked it off her in between her being done with it or in her downtimes. She went into it completely blind and kind of just picked it up because it's the hot game of the moment, really. It's like the meme game of right now, it's almost like got this whole subculture on Twitter, at least, that I've seen of like, if people aren't just sharing their homes and gardens that they're making in this game, it's all jokes about, the Tom Nook, the raccoon that like gives you loans and stuff, and meta-analysis of capitalism and all that kind of stuff. So it's got a lot of chatter online about it, which piqued Shayla's interest. And so she picked it up, having never played it. But I have played the first game on DS, like whenever that came out, a decade ago. It had another subtitle as well, Animal Crossing something or other, but I can't remember what it was. And I couldn't remember whether I liked or didn't like it, but, like, at least I knew what I was getting into. Spoilers, Shayla hated it. She bounced off it so hard, but she kept playing it for ages after she decided she hated it. And so she'd just be sitting there playing it. And every like few minutes, she'd be like, this game is trash. But she kept playing it. So I was like, it made me curious to play it because she was telling me it sucked for so long while continuing to play it.
Which sort of tells you that it doesn't suck, right?
I don't know. It tells you that it's at least got a hook there, right?
Yeah, I feel like I've done that with Assassin's Creed games. I've kind of got like halfway through, and I've been like, I can see I see the pattern now. Like this is no longer a game. This is just like an addiction simulator, and it's just I can see all the shit they're doing to keep me playing this, but I just stick it out through to the end, not enjoying it.
There's that, and also the whole like, if I quit now, the game wins. So you have to sort of.
Speaking of getting one up over the game like that, JT, Shayla just reminded me that the reason she stuck with it so long is because she started just straight up cheating, like gaming the system as hard as she possibly could.
Right. Yeah.
So I think she felt like she was getting back at the game for having wasted her time.
Somewhere a developer is crying because of her actions.
That's it. But yeah, I'll take it back a step for anybody that has no idea what Animal Crossing is. Essentially, you play as a little avatar of yourself and you arrive on a little island to set up your home. All the other characters are little animals, hence it being called Animal Crossing. There is a raccoon named Tom Nook who seems to be like the chief banker of just everything, right? And so you are on this island, and he said, actually, it starts with you like purchasing a deserted island getaway, or deserted island relocation or something. You're relocating to a deserted island is the point. You purchase that. Fast forward, you're there, and Tom Nook's like, welcome. It's time to get started, everybody. Take your tents and pick a spot. And so you can walk over maybe a quarter of this island straight away. You find a spot, you set up your tent, and then you go back, and Tom Nook is like, all right, everybody, we have to name our island. And so you all put forward your votes for what you want to call the island. And of course, whatever you suggest gets picked as the name of the island. And then, you keep getting given menial tasks by Tom Nook for whatever reason. He makes you, because you named the island and everybody's like, wow, that's such a good name for the island. You get made I can't remember what they call it, the representative though, like essentially the voice of the people for the island. So the hierarchy of government on this island is one raccoon who is your capitalist overlord, and then you are the member of parliament for everybody else. So I guess from what I've seen and what I understand of the old game, the point is that you do menial tasks and you earn money, and you can, you know, build a house and a garden, and, you know, if you want to go fishing, you go fishing. You can go catching stuff. You can plant flowers, plant fruit trees, and they'll grow. And it's all kind of in real time. Like, it's daytime the whole time. It's daytime in real life, and then at nighttime it goes dark, and you can sleep, and etc. etc. But also, it's suggested at the start that I pick an island in the same hemisphere as where I live. So right now in the game, it's autumn, and everything's like autumnal colors.
That's kind of cool. I like that sort of synergy.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. Like, I haven't played a lot of it because I'll be honest, I actually bounced off it pretty hard as well. but but Shayla played it for a while longer than I did, and she was getting a bit frustrated at the real timeness of it. Like, she wanted to be able to do things, but it becomes nighttime, and then you're limited in what you can do.
And there's no way to override that sort of real time aspect of it. You can't just sort of play on your own terms.
Well, not legitimately, but that's what we mean when I say Shayla was gaming the system. She'd do stuff and then go into this and close the game, change the system settings of her Switch so that all of a sudden the date has advanced and the time has advanced, and then she'd load the game back up and it goes, oh, 48 hours have changed, when really it's only been like 5 minutes.
So does that mean that the legitimate sort of play style that the game wants you to do is obviously in this real-time aspect, and is that because it's somehow linked to like multiplayer thing? Is that why it has to have that there? Like, so it's in line with other people playing?
Sort of. You can visit like your friends' islands and stuff and like play with each other and whatnot, but it's not like a strictly, you know, you're not going to see other people that have just happened to have built on the same island as you. Everybody gets their own island. I think it's just, you know, the game is trying to be just a cutesy version of real life. And I think for a lot of people, and this might be why it strikes a chord with a lot of people that aren't strictly gamers either, it might be a good one, you know, on the bus in the mornings to work or whatever, or when you're just killing a little bit of time, you just jump up, you log on to like the little computer system in the visitor center, and you get like a number of the in-game currency called bells, and then you can, you know, you have to water your plants so they grow, and so you do that. You can do all your little menial tasks and whatnot, and then you can put it down, and you know, once you get to work, and then on the way home you do your other menial tasks, and it's just, I don't know, a little bit of a time waster. For me, that doesn't work for me, because like the game was just so unwilling to give me freedom to just work out how to do stuff. It kept being like, all right, I had to keep going back to Tom Nook and have him explain how to do things to me, do things in the game. And it's so obvious. There's like 2 buttons, you know, it's just pick the fishing rod out of the menu and throw it at the fish, and then press A to reel them in. And I don't need him to tell me, now go and you can catch fish if you want, just head to the nearest creek. And you can't skip any of the dialogue. You can make it go a little bit quicker, but you can't skip any of it. And it's also got like a little, like a Simlish thing. Every time someone's talking, it goes, and there's,
So
you cannot change anything. Like you cannot skip anything. It's all so self-explanatory, but you're forced to talk to the other characters to do it, and it's slow, and it's, I don't know, it's just absolutely not for me.
So is that not even in like a tutorial aspect? You know, you can't skip tutorials, but this is sort of forcing you to do it all the time.
Look, I feel like eventually there'll be less of that. Like I said, I bounced off of it really quickly, but the game is so simple that I feel like I should be able to do a lot more without having to keep going back and talking to these characters all the time.
Right.
The stuff I've seen about it sort of blowing up has sort of partially been people who I'm friends with who I don't think of as kind of strictly gamers, kind of like you said, Timmy, who are picking this up or who are like buying Switches to play this game. And, you know, like it doesn't sound like you're loving the game heaps, but not to sort of belittle the game, because I guess the Animal Crossing series has like a long history and it's a successful franchise. You know, it's not like this is just something they've come up with now.
Mm.
But I feel like the fact that we are in the middle of a pandemic that causes everyone to be stuck at home has had a massive effect on how this game is received. You know, if this game had come out and everyone had just been, you know, going about their lives as normal, I'm sure there'd be loads of people who are big into the series who are like all about it and stuff like that. But like, I wonder whether some of the stuff you're talking about, which is frustrating you, for other people, it's just like it's something to do, right?
Yeah, and I completely agree. And I think it did get very lucky coming out at the time it did. But at the same time, I feel like as far as games go, when you're stuck at home, it lacks the escapism that, you know, I feel you would need from
Yeah.
games in that situation. Because it's like you're sitting at home and you're looking out at the backyard going, man, I really need to do the gardening. And so you pick up your Switch and you put in Animal Crossing and you go and water your flowers or pull out the weeds or shake the trees to get the fruit off of them.
Maybe
Like,
this is because you're more of a gamer, though. I don't know.
yeah,
Maybe
exactly,
for other
exactly,
people,
yeah.
it's like, this is enough. I don't know. I feel like
Mm.
I'm speaking for people whose perspective I don't hold,
Yeah.
which is you know, problematic.
But yeah,
So I'm just a bit confused at where Animal Crossing fits in terms of a genre, because as you guys know, at least Paul I think knows, is that like I'm a big fan of a game called Stardew Valley,
I
which
was
is
going to
very
mention
similar
that.
to, yeah, which is a game that's similar to another game everyone would probably know called Harvest Moon. And I'm wondering if Animal Crossing fits in that style of gameplay, because again, you know, going back to the escapism that you were just mentioning before, Timmy, you do those sorts of things in Stardew Valley and Harvest Moon, but they're more of, you know, you're a farmer, you're meant to be making a farm. It's not necessarily menial tasks. It's more, that's like you are doing these tasks in those games because that's your livelihood. You know, that's your money to buy
Yeah.
things and upgrade things. So where does Animal Crossing really fit into it? Because I know, honestly, if I'm being honest, I know really nothing about the game.
this is less like have like a working farm that, and you know, and keep it running and administrating that and whatnot, and more make yourself a cute little house just for the sake of making a cute little house that looks how you want it to look. You
So
know?
is this or more or less like a glorified, like, remember those sort of web pages? I think like Newgrounds had a bunch where you would like have a character and you could dress them up in different clothes, and that was ultimately the point of the game. Like, is this sort of like a glorified version of, like, you know, like a dolly simulator where you just sort of
Yeah.
dress,
like
making things look pretty, and that's, you know, that's sort of all about the aesthetic?
it's like the most basic version of The Sims crossed with the most basic version of Minecraft.
Right. Okay. So yeah.
Because
Okay.
it's just like getting resources.
Yeah.
So that you can create like a work desk or whatever, or resources so you can build yourself an axe, so that then you can get hardwood from the trees. And then once you have the hardwood, you can make, you know, stuff out of the hardwood and get what you need to make a shovel. And then you can use the shovel to get bigger stones so that you can build stuff out of that.
Right. But
Yeah.
it sounds like, you know, I guess if you were to compare it to those sorts of things, you've got these, it sounds like there's these kind of hard limits on a lot of the things that in those games you can do, whereas it sounds like in Animal Crossing, obviously it's a very, very, at least to me, sounds like it's a very simplified version of those kinds of things.
See,
Yeah, that's exactly it.
that like gameplay loop that you described doesn't, like, that, you're exactly right. It sounds like Minecraft. So like that doesn't sound bad to me, that like that's the loop. Yeah, I don't know. I had a question, Timmy. I wondered, because you asked me a question a couple of weeks ago about another game. I can't remember which one it was. Because you mentioned how you're like very objective driven in games, and I wondered whether this kind of like, is that something you don't enjoy about it, that it's more kind of open like that it doesn't have, you're not sort of working towards anything, you're just kind of doing stuff?
I mean, like, the game actually kind of goes out of its way to give you heaps of objectives. Like, you have like a phone in the game, and one of the apps is called Nook Miles, and it gives you like, you achieve certain things for doing a certain amount of fishing, or building enough things, or getting your DIY recipes, or catching bugs and stuff. And as you do those things, you can go back to Tom Nook, and like you keep giving him the creatures you're catching, a museum gets built. And so there are objectives, and they don't make you do any one of those. You can kind of choose your objectives. But I guess I just don't find it very interesting. Like in Minecraft, you have the ability to do that loop I was talking about before, but with complete freedom to do whatever you want. Whereas this is like very limited, I feel. Like, I guess, it gatekeeps you so that I have to earn the recipes from Tom Nook before I can make any of the things. So it's not like I can just get the wood and then go, all right, now I can make myself an axe. No, I have to have done the little bit of dialogue or the story or whatever it is. And he goes, oh, as a reward, here, now you can make this thing. And I never know what I'm going to get from him. So it's not like I can go, all right, if I do this, it's going to get me what I need so I can make this. It's all like the game gatekeeps you. So you are learning one thing at a time. And I don't know, like I said, I think it's just not for me because it's not a poorly made game. I just don't find it interesting. So I'm not motivated to do the next thing so that I can build something different and keep going.
Yeah, kind of sounds like there's like those sorts of little things, those intermediate sort of steps you have to take to do other things seem kind of arbitrary when if you're comparing it to other games where you can, build and, like sort of like have a lifestyle or whatever. Those sort of arbitrary steps that you're describing, I guess, like that sounds frustrating to me. Having, played games where there's, not that kind of limit on it would make it a bit frustrating for me. One thing actually I did see, Timmy, it wasn't really a meme. It was like a thing on Reddit, and it was just someone, I think it was on like there's a subreddit called Mildly Infuriating, where it's just like stuff that like sort of, is kind of annoying. One of the things someone posted from Animal Crossing on that was like they were trying to place something, and for some reason things didn't place on like a perfect grid. And so when this guy kept putting something down, it was like slightly off center. And because of how the system worked, like he couldn't change it. And I was like, oh my God, all games have that. But I just remember seeing that and I was like, oh my God, you can't change it. That's so annoying.
Yeah, it's kind of like you face a certain direction and it goes, all right, we think you're trying to place it here. So there is a grid there, but you can kind of face yourself just about in any direction. And yeah.
Yes,
It's that you can't see the grid. It's that you can't see the grid is the problem. Because I put my house in a spot where I really liked it, and there was a little lake in front of it, and that's why I put it there. I thought that's going to be really nice. Some trees behind, lake in front, and there's a spot directly between my front door and the edge of the lake that I wanted to put my campfire, and I could not put it there. It had to be just to the left or just up and to the right, and I was just like, why? Why can't I just put it here? Like, look at all this space. Like, yeah.
It's 2020, God damn it.
JT, you mentioned it before, but Timmy, have you played Stardew Valley?
No. I've nearly downloaded it onto my Switch a bunch of times, just like, because I think the aesthetic of it looks really, really nice.
I like that nearly. I'm just kind of picturing though, what does nearly
it's
mean?
Like it's
like
hand hovering over
then,
the button.
Yeah. And then does someone tackle you and you're like, oh, guys, I almost downloaded Stardew Valley, but then someone just tackled me.
No, I'm like that meme of like the space commander, and he's got the choice of the two buttons, and he's like sweating.
He's sweating.
Like, install Stardew Valley or
I think
start a new playthrough of The Witcher 3.
I'm trying to think, Paul. Is this basing off of the things that Timmy's mentioned that he doesn't like about Animal Crossing so far? I'm not sure if I would recommend Stardew Valley because I wouldn't say it's got necessarily any kind of like massive degree of freedom. It's just that it's a different execution of a similar sort of game.
Well, that's why I'm asking, because like I loved Stardew Valley, and I think from memory, JT, so did you. Although I think when we talked about it on the pod was before you were on here. But like
No, I do. You know, I'm all about that game.
yeah,
I really, really enjoyed it.
I put like 50 or 60 hours into that game and just got so deep into it, and like not even into all of the systems. It was just the kind of certain parts of the farming were engaging enough for me to just kind of go through that loop and go through that grind, because it can get pretty grindy as well.
Yep.
And yeah, I was just curious, Timmy, because because it does sound very similar, but from the stuff I've seen of Animal Crossing, it does have, like, it seems like it's got a more, like, kind of younger audience in mind in terms of the aesthetic, or maybe that's just the Nintendo kind of house style, but from what you said, it sounds like it's kind of, the gameplay flow is designed a bit like that as well, in terms of, like you said, sort of stepping you through everything and not giving you freedom along the way, whereas I feel like Stardew Valley does start out with a bit of that kind of tutorializing, like any game does. But I don't know, JT. I feel like it opens up quite quickly, and that sort of if you want to push ahead yourself, you can. But if you don't want to, the game will also help you through things. Like I remember sort of playing through the start of it and playing through like the first season until I got the hang of everything worked, and then I just went, oh, all right, now I know how it works. I'm going to restart my farm because I know how to do things. And the game didn't sort of make me spend 2 weeks unlocking things besides the normal stuff that takes time to unlock. I was just able to sort of right from the start get straight into it. So
that's right. Yeah.
I feel like it's
the only limits. Sorry to cut in. I guess were just what you had available to you at the time in terms of like resources. But other than that, you can still just do it at your own pace.
Yeah. Like they're
building new things.
There are seasons, just like it sounds like in Animal Crossing, but like you didn't go into that, Timmy. But in Animal Crossing, sorry, I'm getting my games confused. There are seasons in Stardew Valley, but the way they work is I think they last for like 2 weeks game time, and a day in game time is not real time. It's like I can't even remember how long it is. It's not long. It's not even like an hour.
But once the day is finished, like it's got some cool mechanics, Stardew Valley, that I really, really liked, that kind of force you to not dwindle about and sort of make uses of the days as much as possible. Because like when the day runs out, if you're just not anywhere near your house, you pass out, and then you wake up in your bed.
If you've run out of stamina.
Yeah, it's like a penalty. So you've kind of got there's a time limit on each day, which I came to like in the end. I really liked that because it meant that I wasn't just sort of, doing things at this pace and then, getting distracted. It was like, all right, today I've got exactly this many hours to go and do this thing that I need to do. And then that would fill up the day. And then the next day I could do something different. So it's not like in Minecraft or maybe even in Animal Crossing, where it's like you lose track of time trying to figure out what to do, or you just sort of like there's no real objective to each task you're doing.
Right.
You feel it focuses your attention on one thing, right?
It becomes about efficiency at some point, and because the seasons change every 2 weeks, you'll say like, all right, these crops grow in summer, so I've got 2 weeks to do my stuff with these, and then if you play heaps, you could get through a season in a night. And then it's autumn and different things are growing, or when winter comes, nothing is growing, so you got to focus on other stuff. And yeah, like I said back there, Timmy, it sounded like from what you said, the seasons in Animal Crossing are just kind of linked real time.
That's the impression I got. Like, obviously, like I said, I haven't played it for too long. But, at least on a single day level, it was day when it was day and it was night when it was night. And they recommended I go in the same hemisphere as I am in real life. And so it was the same month. So using context clues, I assume that is, it's linked to real world time.
Yeah, so it's like you'll have to wait like a month real time for winter to start and things like that.
Yeah, exactly. And like I would be really keen to see the other seasons and stuff, but I'm not gonna play it for a month to get to winter,
Yeah, I guess I'd be interested to see what you thought of Stardew. Like JT, you could be right
Yeah.
that maybe it's just there does sound like there's a lot. It has a lot in common with this, so maybe it's just not your thing. But I guess I'm interested because that was the one I liked. You know,
Yeah.
So I want to see if you like the one I like.
But yeah, I guess like picking up a game like that where the objective is you have a farm and you need to keep that farm running and upgrade it, and you know that's
I mean,
something that is straight.
Stardew. Just quickly, Timmy. Like, I mean, this might even change your opinion a little bit more, but like, Stardew Valley goes beyond just the farm thing. You've got a community. Like, there's like is it a town pool? It's like a small town that
Yeah.
you're sort of like. There's basically like a Walmart moving in on this small country village, and it's up to you whether or not you sort of want to like nurture the change of, you know, corporate greed or whatever you want to call it. I guess that's sort of the narrative. Or if you want to go the route of like, oh no, I want to support my local. And there's like, you know, a big part of the story is like renovating this community center by like doing different things throughout the game, like different little tasks. And I really liked that. That was a good part of the game that made sure you weren't sort of like lost just doing your own thing sometimes, which, you know, you can do in those sorts of games.
Yeah, but see, that sounds instantly more appealing to me than just like you've moved onto a new island and now make yourself a nice house and it can look like whatever you want within the constraints of this particular game.
Do you know?
So-
It might be a kind of a mark in favor of Stardew Valley and freedom in it, in that I barely touched the community center for about the first 40 hours that I played the game, JT.
Right.
Like I saw
Yeah.
that it was a thing. I saw it was a thing, and I saw that they're like, oh, donate these things, collect all these collections so that we can open like the next room or whatever. And I was just kind of like, yeah, all right, okay, I'll deal with that later. And the game never, like, it never sort of stopped me and said, all right, you've got to go and do that community center before you advance. It let me play through like all 4 seasons, like unlock all of the crops, do all of the various things all around my farm, never telling me like you've got to go there and do that. I could have just kept playing that game without ever even walking into the community center outside of, you know, the starting story stuff, which I think was really cool that it let you do that. And I think in like my 3rd year, eventually I was like, all right, I'll go and check out this community center, and then I went and unlocked the stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah,
absolutely.
I guess like I didn't think we were going to talk about Animal Crossing for this long because I didn't play that much of it and didn't really enjoy it. But here we are. Right before we move off of it though, I did want to say in regards to like its success with like, you know, online communities and everybody talking about it and stuff, I kind of feel like it has something to do with just how long it's been between these two games. Because, you know, the first Animal Crossing was like quite I feel like it was quite close to the start of the first DS that had the hinge, like the 2 screens. And so, you know, a lot of people got it because it was basically a launch title. And, you know, it kind of got this little cult following. And, you know, it kind of had that kind of like online meme-y, I don't know, community doesn't feel like the right word, but, you know, people were laughing about Tom Nook being like the worst landlord in the world like a decade ago, right? And it kind of had the jokes that everyone remembers. So when they announced the new one's coming out, all the people that played it were all buzzing and talking about it, and all those jokes were coming back to life. And so it really brought in a whole bunch of like, you know, their friends and other people. And I think that is what has really helped it like boom with this latest version. Like the pandemic stuff as well, absolutely. But I feel like it was just the right length of time for people to go, oh yeah, I had a lot of fun with that. And that was a bit of a silly, easy to put down game. So maybe I'll pick it up, and, you know, maybe Tom Nook's still like a crazy landlord who's going to be ripping everybody off. Let's see what's happening.
It definitely appealed, sounds like, to, you know, the people who played it, almost to the point where like it was, the gap was long enough that it was like almost a little bit nostalgic. So people were like, cool, I'm going to pick up the, you know, like you said, I want to know what's going on now, because it's a game I played ages ago.
Yeah, I was considering buying it, right? And once I played this one, I was like, that's right, I didn't really love it, the old one. Like, I played it, I was like, this is exactly what I remembered. but like I can't imagine I played it much longer than this back then. Like I have no real vivid memories of doing anything spectacular. I just kind of did what I could for a little bit and then played something more interesting to me. So I think like that really giving a long rest to everybody between games probably helped them a lot.
Hint, hint, other game companies.
Except for the games I really love. Keep making them constantly.
No, it goes bad. We know it goes bad.
Have we learned
Yeah.
nothing, Timmy?
Alrighty, but like I said, we've been speaking about Animal Crossing for far longer than I feel it deserves. So, what else have you guys been playing?
Well, I've been playing Age of Empires 2 Definitive Edition, which we've talked about before on the pod. I think when it first came out, I picked it up and gave my thoughts on it back then. But I've kind of come back to it. I guess it's sort of connected with the whole pandemic situation as well, because I have quite a few friends now who JT is one of, who have picked this up either during this time or had it already and have kind of decided to get back into it because there's not much else to do. And so we've kind of got a little bit of an AoE group going on, which is quite fun. There's about 4 or 5 of us who probably for the last month have been getting on every sort of 2 or 3 nights and playing. It sort of died off a bit recently. But yeah, I've played a lot of multiplayer Age of Empires 2, which we've been playing against the AI. So it's multiplayer, but it's cooperative. So we kind of do 2 or 3 of us, depending on how many are playing at a given time, against like 2 or 3 AIs. And it's been interesting because we've been kind of slowly getting better. And we started against like standard AIs, and then we sort of figured out a more efficient way to play. So we go up to moderate difficulty, and like now we're trying to play against hard AIs. And it's kind of been a fun process to sort of figure out different things about the game. Like when I first played Age of Empires 2, I would just sort of sit around building a base forever and ever and ever and things like that. And we've sort of got quite good at the sort of things like you've got to be at the castle age within like 14 minutes against hard AI. Otherwise, like you're never going to win the game. And while that kind of does sound quite gamey, and I want to say a bit more about that later, it's been kind of fun sort of getting our AoE efficiency levels up so that we're able to sort of, we start a game and everyone just kind of goes silent for like the first 10 minutes because everyone is so focused on getting sort of every click right so that we can sort of get off to a good start.
Just in terms of like getting back into it, and I guess the I don't know, just the fun of the game in general. But what I've been doing, Paul, like, and I really enjoy doing this, is because it automatically saves all your games and like the replays of them after you've done a multiplayer session. I've been going back, like I've done it a few times now, even on the same game, but I really love going back and just watching the game back through, like, you know, crack open a beer and then watch it, because it's like it's like kind of like watching like a YouTube. It's like watching like a YouTube one, because as you know, I'm not sure if you know our listeners know, but like we follow a few different Age of Empire professional players on YouTube who like sort of break down core mechanics, or they watch a game and then they break down, you know, what's happening and sort of commentate the game as it's happening in real time. So, you know, watching our own games doing that is kind of a bit of fun, you know, seeing like, because when I'm playing the game, I can't see what you guys are really doing because I'm focusing on my stuff.
Yeah.
But then, you know, I load up a replay, and then I get to watch how you sort of played that same game, you know, like, because, you know, like your score is generally sort of much higher than say my score or some of our other friends. So I'm like, how did Paul get to that score at that point in time? Like, you know, what's he doing differently to me? So it's a bit of like, you know, a bit of fun, a bit of learning. Yeah, I've really enjoying just going back and watching our games. It's like a little bit therapeutic, I think, sometimes.
I guess in terms of the difficulty, as we've kind of been going up the levels, like you say, kind of trying to figure out, like giving each other little tips about how to deal with a hard AI. Like we kind of, every couple of games, one of us will sort of figure out something that's a bit more effective, and then we'll all kind of switch to doing that. I wanted to talk about how I think the way I play Age of Empires, even as we're playing at the moment and trying to kind of, do better and do a little bit of kind of min-maxy type stuff, I still like to play the game, and I use the word realistically, even though there's nothing at all realistic about Age of Empires. I still like to play it realistically in the sense that, I still like to place my buildings in a way that makes it look like a real video game medieval town, and the people I play with, I feel like, I know you do, JT, and some of our other friends, we all kind of like to build bases that look nice as well as kind of doing well in the game. Like I said, I use the word realistically, but it's not really like that. It's more like our version of what it would be like if medieval warfare really just involved, telling a villager to quickly build a wall.
Yeah, and it's leisure, right? At the end of the day, you want to play the game the way you want it without having to submit to, all right, there's one way I can play this game that's absolutely going to win hands down. Like, then what's the point in playing after that if you know that method is going to work? I guess it's, you want it to work, but at the same time have the freedom to play the game the way you want it.
It's interesting that you say that the bit you said there about wanting it to look nice, because I feel like when I have played Age of Empires, and obviously 2's the one I think we've all played the most, I get very caught up, and the number one detriment to my efficiency, as you put it, is the layout of my camp.
Right.
Because at the start, I'm like, you've only got so many people, so you don't want to have everybody cutting down trees to make lots of room. And so I'm like, all right, well, obviously I want all my military buildings to kind of be like near each other. So, there's the military part of town and then there's this stuff, but there's not really room to have them in a straight line. So I'll fix that up later. So then you're hustling to get to the next age or whatever. And you're like, oh, this is looking so cluttered now. It's an absolute cluster. And you're like, the wall going around everything is having to go around that bunch of trees there. It looks horrible. And it's like, do I really have the time to be stopping and getting the feng shui of my Mayan village all right,
Yeah, that is exactly the kind of stuff I'm talking about. I always like to have my military buildings sort of in a certain. Ideally I like to have a castle with the military buildings around it for no reason other than it kind of creates a little military district in my town.
Spot on. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, but the kind of the point I wanted to get to here is that on the lower difficulties of the game, that's entirely feasible. And, you can play like that and there's really no detriment. But as we've been sort of pushing up to kind of higher levels, we've sort of found that point where the way to be successful at high difficulties or online, as kind of JT and I have found out from watching a bit of online Age of Empires, is basically to play in a way that is so far detached from anything even realistic, even though Age of Empires is not like a historically accurate game. You have to play in such a gamey way to be successful on high difficulties that there may as well not even be a medieval skin over the game. You may as well just be dealing with colored shapes and numbers, because that's how you play the game. And I think it's been interesting for us to kind of reach about that level and then realize that that's not fun. That if we want to push to the next difficulty up from this, we're going to have to start playing the shapes and numbers game rather than the pretend medieval warfare game. And it almost feels like that's a bit where we lost our steam with Age of Empires. Like I said, it's slowed down the amount that we've been playing the last couple of weeks, and I feel like it's maybe a bit connected with that part of the fun of it is that sort of pretend city building, as much as that has no effect on the game. And it's just kind of, I don't know, it's just an interesting observation that I feel like when we've watched those kind of games online, JT, they're actually quite fun to watch, to see sort of what crazy things people do to win games, like building towers in each other's bases and walling off weird sections to create choke points. But when we're actually doing it ourselves, it's not fun at all.
Yeah, I think our play style, at least for you and I, and I probably can't speak people like Flynn and Taylor, though it might be sort of somewhat similar, but we're not super competitive
No.
in terms of we need to win because, like you said, in this kind of game, if you want to win, there are formulas you can follow to the letter that basically say, if you do this, you will probably win the game against an AI. But that's not how we want to play the game. And I think, sort of we got to the point where it was like 3 of us versus 2 hard AI, which is still definitely a challenge. But there's still that room for us to be able to play the game at, I don't want to say our own pace, because I think, playing against hard AI, there definitely is a sort of like a pace sort of element to it. You always need to be doing something. But we can still play the game to our own style. Like you said, like we can still place things where we want them to place, and we can still build, there's a bit of freedom in the kind of units we build. We make do with the things we have built. And so I think we've hit that sort of perfect spot I think at that point. And, we can probably still build on that a bit more. But I tend to agree that, some of the steam was lost when we sort of realized that, much further we're getting into just completely gaming Age of Empires and then just min-maxing everything. And, that's when the game stops becoming fun.
Yeah, I agree. and you kind of mentioned there's sort of like that process of sort of figuring out the strategy that just kind of works against the AI. We have also found that the AI it's a bit all or nothing. It can be like, if you get certain things right at the beginning of the game and in the first, say, 20 minutes, you will win. It's kind of like there is no other way about it. The AI will not break your defenses and you will win the game. It's just a matter of how long does it take you to wear them down. But if you don't get to that point, they will overrun you. And it is almost impossible to turn the game around from there, which is not, like, it's not the best way for it to work, really, especially once we figure out what the you will win strategy is. We play a couple of games of those. It feels really satisfying. And then it's sort of like, all right, well, what now? Now we know 100% how to beat the hard AI as long as we kind of get a good start to the game. Then it's, do we push to a higher difficulty and we have to start playing the super gaming min maxi way, or do we just kind of play a few more of these? It's it's a tough thing. It's not to say the game is not fun, because I think we've all been having a heaps good time with Definitive Edition, but it's just sort of an interesting fine line in terms of the difficulty.
Yeah, I think it really highlights the limitations of these types of games, and especially this type of game that, if we're really looking at it objectively, it was made how many years ago, and we're really playing with the limitations that a game that is, I actually don't know when it came out, 20 years old.
I would think
something
so.
Like that.
Yeah.
We're playing with the limitations of a 20-year-old game, and it's obviously been refurbished, and there have been some small gameplay enhancements, obviously, to work with like flow and making things a little bit less grindy. For instance, like the auto seeding of farms. But outside of that, we're playing an old game, and so we've got those limits that we're sort of going to come up against when we're playing it. One thing I did want to really quickly raise is the other game that I really want everyone sort of to maybe pick up at some point, but I don't know if you remember Total Annihilation. It's an old game. It's available on Steam, but that's the only other game that really struck the same sort of chord that Age of Empires did. Obviously, it's nothing even remotely close in terms of themes, because it's like a futuristic robot strategy game, but it had the same sort of like, rush to get certain types of resources and then build certain types of units. But yeah, I don't know, that's another game that like I would compare to Age of Empires 2 in terms of similar gameplay. So I'd be really interested to see what your thoughts on that, if you were ever to get into that.
Well, I played it when it came out, but it never stuck with me the way Age of Empires did back in the day.
Right.
So I don't know whether it'd be different now.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, I just thought I'd mention that because it's just that's for me it maybe didn't stick with me, but it just has that same sort of a lot of the similar sort of elements that it's basically like regicide because you've got your commander. If your commander dies, the game ends. But like it's like always playing with regicide basically.
It's interesting. You're talking about how, Age of Empires stuck with you more than like the other games like that. And I was agreeing with you, and I was thinking like, yeah, like no other games like I just like the music from Age of Empires just like really like stuck with me. And then I realized for me, the music of Age of Empires is not anything that like Microsoft made at all. It's just that I don't know about you guys, but when I fired up Age of Empires 2, it would automatically play whatever CD was in my disc tray.
Nice.
And
So what did you often have in your disc tray, Timmy?
my number one soundtrack for playing Age of Empires, and it happened by accident because it just started up and I was like, this suits it so well, was Blackwater Park by Opeth.
Wow.
Which is
I can see that working.
Dude, it's okay. Also, for some reason, it also always started from track 2. It would skip the first track. So it would open up on I think it was like Bleak. Wait, what's the second track called?
I can't remember.
I think it's Bleak because Leper Affinity's first. Yeah, and that's got this really Middle Eastern scale in it. It's just like diddle 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 diddle, and like these really nice chords and so like it really suit Age of Empires, even though it would get like heavy and techy and stuff. It had that Middle Eastern scale and key that it was in, and it like really suited like kind of the dusty plains and like medieval stuff you're doing. And so like that's really stuck with me, and like it strengthens my opinion of Age of Empires, even though it's nothing that game did.
I have
proxy.
I have a few kind of like I've had that before, like weird music associations. Like there's a Missy Higgins album that I was listening to so much when I was leveling in a very specific zone in World of Warcraft. So whenever I go to that zone, if I play WoW or if I listen to the songs from that album, all I can see is Stranglethorn Vale in World of Warcraft, because that's like those two like perfectly correlated, and it's just kind of imprinted on my memory.
That's a really strange pairing as well. Like that's just a connection.
Unfortunately, Paul, I don't think Missy Higgins made it into the World of Warcraft film. Not from my memory.
And you know what? I think her career probably was all the better for it. All right, so we're going to take a quick break, and then, as always, we'll be back to discuss some further games that we've been playing.
Video games.
All right, welcome back. Lots of discussion already about games that we didn't think were going to take us that long, but consequently, we haven't heard from you yet, JT, about what you've been playing.
Yeah, well, as you know from last podcast, I was getting into GTA 5. I finished that and sort of went off it pretty quickly. Didn't really. I don't know. I just once you finish that game in story mode, there's not really a whole bunch that can really link you to it, and online doesn't really tickle my fancy that much. So I've gone off of that pretty quickly, and I've jumped straight into the Crysis series, which I have finished Crysis 1 back when it first came out in 2007, I think. Back then, I think I actually purchased a PC just so I could play that, because I was like so blown away by the graphics at the time.
That's when we lived together as well, and I remember being blown away. I was like, had been a strictly console gamer.
Yeah,
and I remember just absolutely being floored by what that game looked like on your computer.
Yeah, and like, it's still pretty crazy. Like, it's it's still a demanding game, and I'm not sure if that's because it is technically demanding because of what it was built on back then, or if it's something else. But it still looks great.
It's,
You know,
it's
you play.
poorly optimized, maybe, or something.
Yeah, I think it was actually only built so that it would work with like one CPU core. So that's obviously a big bugaboo. But you know, like there's games still coming out now that do that, which is, you know, silly. But graphics wise, it still holds up. You know, it's a great game. It was one of the first games to do like a lot of the DirectX 10 stuff. I don't know how technically inclined you guys are or some of our listeners are, but DirectX is sort of like the a lot of like the different graphics methods, and I think they're called APIs, I think. But the different sorts of things that a graphics card can do is sort of dictated by the DirectX version it's running. And so DirectX 10 was like the big one for 2007, and a lot of the stuff you see in games now that you probably take for granted came in with DirectX 10.
And they built their own engine, right? It's like the Cry engine for those games.
Yeah. This one, Crysis, runs on CryEngine 2. The first CryEngine was actually for Far Cry, the first Far Cry game, which I never played, but you know that was another game that was sort of like a bit of like a benchmark for graphics and stuff at the time.
Quick question:
But
was that developed by Crytek, or did
I
they
think
just
Crysis,
make the engine?
I'm pretty sure Far Cry was Crytek. I'll have a quick look because I have the technology. Yes, it is actually, very quickly. I'm really, really liking jumping back into the game. You know, obviously there's the nostalgia aspect, but it doesn't feel like I'm playing a game that it's like, oh, this is nostalgic because, you know, it looks crappy and it plays, you know, it's nothing like what I remember it, but it's still just sort of like, you know, it's conjuring up these feelings from yesteryear. It's sort of like playing it for the first time again because it is still such an advanced game. And I don't know, like it's got like sort of like an action film, dumb sort of narrative. You know, it's like aliens, military dudes in like cool suits versus North Korea.
So,
and but outside of that, it's still just a fun game because of the, you know, things like the gunplay, the weightiness of the guns. Actually, it doesn't have great weightiness. If that's going to be a common term that we use now, it doesn't have great weightiness, but it's got great gameplay and the way you can execute your missions. It's not open world, but the maps each level is huge, so you can execute your objectives in, like, you know, by going stealth or by, you know, sort of like blitzing through it with the speed mode because your suit has all these different modes, or just like brute forcing it with like strength and firepower. And it's one of the few games I've played that really, really does that well. The freedom of choice to play things out, depending on how you like to play the game.
So I played it when it came out as well. I don't know if I played it on my PC because I don't think I could run it at first. I think sort of a friend who had a PC who could run it, and I never played through the whole thing. Like I didn't play the story and do it all, but kind of what you're saying about it having that freedom. I remember it being kind of a bit sandboxy, as much as it is like, you know, a linear shooter, and I think you go through levels and stuff, right?
Yeah. There are levels, but the levels are huge.
Yeah, that was kind of my memory
Yeah.
of it. That I'd play it and you'd go into a level, but it's not like you're running down a corridor, or even sort of, you know, going along one path. It's like you join the level, and then I just spend like, you know, 30 minutes mucking about at the start of the level, you know, doing like weird physics stuff with blowing things up or having like firefights with
shooting trees and making them fall down and stuff.
Yeah. It had that, like I said, that sandboxy feel, which it was weird. It felt a bit like it was somewhere between a linear first-person shooter story-driven game, like you're saying, and a sandbox tech demo for the engine.
Yeah, it almost feels like a tech demo, but like I mean that in the best way possible because it's
yeah.
got, you know, it's sort of like you said, it's that perfect balance between linear and non-linear, but it's got like weird little things set up, like, you know, that there's no reason for them really to be in the game other than just to fuck around with it. Mind my language. Have we ever has anyone ever sworn on the pod before with the F word?
Frequently.
Yeah, it's happened.
I'm
Really?
pretty sure. Yeah.
Okay. I thought this was like a super
I mean-
family friendly podcast.
Well,
but
I've
yeah.
never had to put the explicit tag on an
Oh,
episode, so
okay, right.
technically we've never been picked up for it, which does happen.
We
Us three are
might be
pretty
allowed
good.
one, maybe one per podcast.
One naughty.
We're at the limit already.
Way back in the day where there used to be a little bit more, I reckon. But like, yeah, I was just going to say, while you're talking about like the levels and like how it's really open, and that was like quite impressive considering the graphics and the engine and everything. I've only played Crysis 2 and I played that on console. But JT, the level I remember you playing lots when I used to come and watch over your shoulder and marvel at it, I thought it was really cool. It was a level that was like, I don't know what any of them were called, obviously, but it was like a beachy level. Like you were walking around a camp that was like right on the water, and there were like palm trees and stuff, and it was really
Yeah,
sunny. And
that's probably the
considering-
first level.
That's
Yeah.
also
Yeah,
what I
considering
remember.
Yeah,
considering it's like a sci-fi game, and you know you're in this really techy suit, and it's like shooting and tech and stuff. It was quite a interesting juxtaposition that it starts off in a real like, you know, Costa Rica looking kind of area.
yeah. Well, not to be too much of a spoiler, especially since it's a game from 2007, but it's called Crysis, as in spelt Crysis. But at about halfway through the game, something happens that completely freezes the island over, and it turns into Winter Wonderland. So, speaking of that sort of like dichotomy between, you know, the two themes there is a literal divide between the sunny summer, you know, I think it's set in the Philippines, like on the equator, and then all of a sudden, literally in like a split second, the entire island becomes this like massive just ice kingdom. And so it's a really, really cool sort of dynamic that happens at that point of the game, and it also changes up a lot of the gameplay mechanics. Yeah, I mean, that's basically the game as much as I can sort of describe it. From what I can remember, there's some other cool things that happen, I think, throughout the game. I'm not up to it yet, but like you lose gravity at some point as well. So like, you know, things like there's no up or down in some levels. It's just completely like zero gravity, which was, I think, sort of like a pretty new thing at the time that hadn't really been explored too much.
The one strong memory that I have of playing Crysis that's like really vivid is when I was just sort of messing about in one of those early levels. It was nighttime, I think, and I swam all the way out to sea, and it was kind of early enough that like early enough in kind of game development that a sandboxy, even open worldy sort of level thing felt new, that I kind of swam out to sea and thought, oh, I'm just going to see how far I can swim out. And I think
I know what happened.
You probably do, because I guess this was their way of like having invisible walls without invisible walls. Was a shark fin starts to circle you eventually, and then you know you get killed by the shark. And I remember it being like really intense and really scary.
It's not crap.
That, like,
yeah,
no,
it's not ham-fisted. It's fucking terrifying. Well,
it was
there's
like
another F1, but yeah.
it was like nighttime and raining, and this shark fin is circling around, and I remember kind of diving under the water, and it's like the last thing I see before I die is just like the shark mouth open coming towards me. And
yeah,
it was like
I remember the first
on.
time that happened it was crazy, and just the execution of it, like, you know, they could have just been like, you swim too far out, and then a shark just comes directly at the screen, and then that's it. But it's like the suspense that they sort of, you know, it circles you, and then like sometimes it goes towards you, but then it doesn't, and you're like, is this thing actually going to attack me? And then it, you know, tears into you. I think the other thing they threw in there as well is like there's these massive frigates on the horizon, and if you go too far out, say on a boat or something, so where the sharks can't get you, they will shoot missiles at you.
That's cool.
So yeah, but it's cool. Like it didn't, any other game probably would have put a wall there, right? Something like that, or like a turn around and then you die.
Yeah. I even like
Nah.
that, JT. You just mentioned like the shark would kind of come in at you and then not attack you necessarily straight away. And I guess that was their version of turn back now. You were leaving the game area,
Yeah,
The
yeah,
shark kind
yeah,
of comes in at you and you go, whoop, all right, I
Yeah.
need to get out of here.
yeah. Probably like genuinely one of the scariest gaming moments I've ever had. And that's including like horror games, is encountering the shark in Crysis.
I
So
would-
yeah,
I-
kudos to them.
I always appreciate little things like that with specifically like borders of game worlds to kind of find ways to make them believable. Like I think we've mentioned it before, but I always found that Witcher 2 had really intelligent world design that meant that the edges of each kind of zone in the game always felt natural. That and it's actually better than Witcher 3. Witcher 3 has the kind of turn back here, otherwise there's nothing past here, basically invisible walls. Whereas Witcher 2, you would come to the edge of the map and you would feel like it makes total sense in game that I can't go further here, which I always appreciate that little bit more immersion.
Can you refresh my memory on exactly what that is? Because I'm having a hard time remembering what the Witcher 2 boundaries are like.
It's just like I think it's the first, it might actually be the second act because the first is a big thing in a castle, but the second act where you're sort of in a forest, it just has very natural geographic features that you can't go past.
Right.
So kind of cliff walls and things like that, or sort of like density of forest that you just look at and you don't think, oh, I could walk through there, but this is the end of the game world. You sort of look at it and it just feels like, well, obviously I can't go through there. And then Act 2 has like, it's set in sort of two sides of a big valley, and it has sort of some bits are just like cliffs going into the sea, or it just has water as a boundary and there's no boats in Witcher 2. So it just has lots of little things like that where you feel like these are natural borders.
Yeah, natural borders, but also not. They don't feel like they're there to specifically keep you out, although that is exactly what they're there for.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, that's Crysis for me, and Crysis Remastered is coming out soon too, so that's like sort of why I'm sort of playing it now, because I really, really want to get the old take on it, and then see what happens in the new take, which is hopefully going to be, a bit of a step up graphically. I'm sure it will be. But that's not all from Timmy. He has been playing other games apart from Animal Crossing. Timmy, can you tell us a bit about what else you've been playing?
Yeah, so stepping away from video games for a moment here and into the world of board and card games. Yeah,
Unheard of.
I know. And not only that, this also kind of harkens back to a couple of episodes ago when we were talking about playing games over Steam or Zoom or Messenger over video chat while we're in pandemic, because I got together with some friends over Facebook Messenger and we played a version of Werewolves. Now, we probably haven't spoken about it on the podcast before because it's a game that we used to play lots and lots a few years ago when I would have the big games night at my house, because you need a minimum of 9 people to play it and it tops out at 16. So it's kind of like, it's essentially a party game, right? Because you need that many people, but you also need that many people to kind of be quiet and pay attention and not, just be like partying and drinking and doing their own thing. So Werewolves, very quickly before I get into this version that I played, which is called Ultimate One Night Werewolf, which I'm sure some people have played before. I own a copy of it. Normal werewolves, or werewolves of Miller Hollow, essentially you and the other 7 to 15 people you're playing with all make up the population of a small village, and amongst you are some werewolves. And each night you play a number of rounds called nights, and each night everyone closes their eyes and different people open their eyes at different points throughout the night based on the character card they've been given and carry out missions. So the werewolves have to kill people, and then the townspeople have to vote on who they think the werewolf is based on noises they heard or movement they felt and stuff like that. So you guys know this one, so I'm going to move on very quickly. If anyone's interested, Werewolves is a great game that you can play for free, basically, if you just read the rules and write out the cards yourself. But One Night Ultimate Werewolf is a little bit different in that instead of the werewolves choosing to kill somebody and then all the people talk and they lynch somebody and then it repeats until either both the werewolves are dead or the werewolves kill everybody else. One Night, as the title implies, only has one round and the werewolves don't kill anybody. So nobody dies. There's no player elimination straight up. So that's a pro. But essentially what happens is there are a lot more character roles with abilities. And what happens is you wake up and then everybody has to work out who the werewolf is by like people volunteering who they are and what their abilities are. And a lot of the abilities are stuff like there's a troublemaker who can swap two people's cards. And there are characters called the Masons, like two of them, and they know who the other one is. And there's a character called the Insomniac who they get to look at their card again before the discussion happens, and nobody else can. You only look at your card at the start, right? Because the troublemaker might have swapped your card, and then, you know, someone goes, you're being very tight-lipped because you're pretty sure you're a werewolf, but it turns out that the troublemaker actually swapped your card with a villager. And so now that is
so
actually
you
the
don't
werewolf.
know they did it. Sorry.
No,
So
no,
you.
they don't.
Oh, okay, right.
No, so Paul, you and I played this once, and I think we didn't really understand the value of it because we were kind of like, so we've done it, and now we've just kind of everybody said what they did, and we've kind of just like talked it backwards until we've worked out who's who. But when you get enough people and you have enough other roles in there, it becomes a game of, okay, I'm pretty sure I'm not a werewolf, but I'm going to stay tight-lipped for now, just in case my character role has been changed. And so you got to kind of pick your battles. When am I going to proffer the information that I have? When am I going to shut up? Am I going to be able to work out what's happened to who? Like the first game we played, I was a werewolf. And so I was playing so cagey. And then the game ended and cards were revealed. And I was on the winning team because I wasn't a werewolf. You know, so in some ways it can be a little bit, you know, unsatisfying because there's an element of fluke to it. But in other ways, it's really interesting, like trying to get to the bottom of this thing if you can get like a piece of information. And I think there are certain roles that also add to it. But I'm going to stop there in case you guys have questions straight away because I'm throwing all of this info at you.
I wanted to sort of chime in with my 2 cents about it because, as you said, we have played a bit of this, I think, you and I and sort of our group of people who we used to play some games with. And then I think I have also played it with another group of friends a few times as well. And I have always been a little bit lukewarm on original Werewolves. Like I've had some games of it where it's really fun, but I've also had some games of it where I feel like it's a bit too chaotic. I feel like it's a really good party game when people are drinking, but sometimes the sort of just random chaos of it gets to me, and I feel like you can't really play it. You're just kind of along for the ride.
Do you mean One Night specifically?
No. I'm talking about original Werewolf.
Normal Werewolves. Okay.
Yeah, and I'm not a huge fan of a game where people are eliminated and other people keep playing. And I have also had a lot of games of Werewolf where either myself or other people are eliminated early, and the game really goes on for a long time. And
yeah, I always use you as a case study when I'm telling people about this game because you and I and our friends play a lot of deception games, and because we do, and you and I are probably the most experienced at games and explaining the rules and stuff, you are perceived as a threat very early on in Werewolves because you know
Right.
what's going on, and you always get eliminated first.
Yeah, well, when I tried One Night Ultimate Werewolf, after trying it a few times, I came to enjoy it more than normal Werewolf because it has all the same elements. So it's still chaos. You still don't have all the information. You still, at some point, like I said, you're just kind of along for the ride and things just kind of fall how they fall. But it's all over very quickly, and then you reset and you go again. And I really
Yeah.
liked that you're not stuck out of the game because you've been killed for 15 minutes while people are playing. And the fact that you have no information is kind of all over so quickly that you just jump straight back into it. I think, yeah, in my opinion, it's the superior game.
See, I disagree, and I'll explain why. But I will say in Werewolf's favor that the reason I don't think the player elimination thing is necessarily a problem. Like, I understand it would be if you get eliminated early on, 2-3 games in a row. That would suck, But in the games that I've played, and I would play a lot with going away on retreats with my choir and stuff. Like we'd play these big games with like the maximum amount of characters and stuff. And again, you were probably right, a little bit better when you're drinking, but it becomes a case of, when you're out, then you go, oh, that person's the werewolf, and you've got that bit of information, and it's very fun watching everybody try to work it out while you know what's going on. And that's the experience I've seen other people had as well. So I'm not discounting your
Right.
take on it, but I think for the right type of people, it's pretty fun as a spectator sport as well, I think.
Yeah, I guess maybe it's the group that you have,
Yeah.
possibly, because I guess because
If people get distracted and they start going off because they're eliminated, then absolutely,
yeah,
it's
I
going to
think
stop being fun.
I
And then
feel
it's
like
noisy and nothing works. Yeah.
I feel like because it's a pretty low barrier to entry game, it's the kind of thing you bust out when you're having a games night and half the people aren't really into games that much. It tends, in my experience, it's been the kind of thing where when someone gets eliminated, well, the phone's out, and then they're on their phone, they're not paying attention, and they're away from the game. So it sort of ends up being like, you got 4 people playing Werewolf and then 4 people sitting off to the side, doing something else. And in the end, like, if everyone's having fun, it doesn't matter. But like me personally, I like it when everyone's involved. But go on about like what you were saying.
So I think, I'm a little bit biased because playing the normal werewolves, I've almost always been the moderator, which means I always have something to do and I'm always crafting the story. I'm pulling the people through the night, and I like to infuse it with a lot of story. So I'm like making up this narrative as I go, like explaining to the people what they see when they wake up, and everybody debates and they get to all yell about what they think, and everybody votes at the end, and then were they right? No, so they have to go home and it starts over again. And I really like the ongoing debate and the growing of the story throughout it, and that kind of narrative weaving through. And we'll put on the Last of Us soundtrack or some ominous music to kind of set a mood as well. Whereas in this one, you don't get any of that. You don't get this story, you don't get these people experiencing the night, really. Like, it just, it kind of lacks a little bit of that, the atmosphere for me.
I think last Fringe, or maybe the Fringe before, Timmy, there was that one night werewolf.
It's not one
like
night.
an event.
It's not one night. They run a game like the normal
Right.
werewolves. It's exactly Werewolves of Miller's Hollow, and they just run it live.
Okay.
It's the biggest rip because, like, I'm like, I'll do this for you for free. Come hang out.
Yeah, but I feel like Werewolf, you could really turn it into an all night thing. You like kind of like in the same way you've got these murder mystery nights, right?
Yeah.
You could turn Werewolf, or one night Werewolf, whichever version you're playing, into like everyone plays their character sort of like as the best as they can. Like, even if they're a wolf, maybe they're sort of a bit sus about it. Like, maybe, depending on how people, want to be invested in their character, you could sort of turn it into sort of like not just a sit down thing where, like there's rounds. You could make it like an all night thing, and then, still get that sort of like atmosphere in there, have the music going, maybe people dress up a little bit, like, sort of dress up as if they're, in the 16th century or 17th century or something like that.
Yeah.
You could go all out on it, I reckon.
I like that. I like that we've gone from one night werewolf, which is literally a game that takes like 5 minutes to play, to actual literal one night werewolf where people get in character and role play the entire night.
But then, JT, that would really suck for the people that get killed, you see.
Yeah, because it's serious, so they die in real life.
Yeah, they actually die. Yeah, there you go. One night werewolf.
But yeah, so like one night absolutely works so much better over Skype. Like I was sitting there when my friend Alex told me we were going to play it. I was like, what happens if I'm a werewolf here on, because we had like a group of people in one room in South Australia, and Shayla and myself were on the video over here, and so most people were in the same room. I'm like, what if Shayla or myself are a werewolf, but someone on the video is our fellow werewolf? How are we meant to like communicate, look at each other, and pick the same person? Because I'm just going to be pointing at a screen, going, "I think we should kill them," and they're like, "You're just pointing at the camera. Like you can be pointing at anyone, right?" But one night works really well because like you don't have any of that in the moment. We have to communicate. We used an app that led us all through it. So if you were to see it, it would say touch your screen for like who you want to see, like on our mobiles, and it would just show you that person's card, etc., etc. And the app would lead you through it. So we didn't need a moderator, and we didn't need to try and communicate with anybody. So it worked really well. And so I guess my conclusion is I think there is a time and a place for both versions of the game. I still feel like I enjoy traditional werewolves more, but coming into playing One Night Ultimate Werewolf and thinking, "Oh, I remember this, and I don't think I really liked it that much." I've got a new appreciation for it, and I'm looking forward to giving it another crack sometime.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting to know that you can still do some of those things that what you would consider in the traditional version possibly, not doable. But obviously you can do them. But one big thing with the traditional version that sort of has always struck me as being kind of intrinsic to that version is the sensory sort of aspect of it. So one part of when you're playing original werewolf is you're all sitting in a room and you can hear these things happening. You can hear someone fidgeting or someone looking slightly to the right because perhaps they're looking at a werewolf, so you hear their clothes move a little bit, and that's a huge part of determining who you're going to pick to lynch, right? So what is that completely lost in the over the Skype version? It like where does that get taken into it? Like at what point are you like, we kind of need that part into it? How do you get around that kind of thing?
That part's basically gone, right? So over Facebook message, Facebook video chat, when we were doing it, essentially, we established that there were certain roles that it was good to speak up first. So if you were the Mason, you'd be like, "Hey, I was a Mason, and I can confirm that so and so was also a Mason." And assuming you're telling the truth, that person would go, "Yep, I can do it as well." We had one game when another person went, "I'm the seer or the fortune teller," and I looked at his card, and he's definitely a Mason, and so all three of us are good. And everybody kind of moved on and went, "All right, cool. So we know those three." But then, different people are claiming different things, and someone goes, "Well, how do we know that seer was actually the seer? He could have just been like, I'm going to get in good with these two people and confirm their story," etc., etc. So you're doing it on the hypothesis and your claims of innocence and accusations and stuff, but the whole going off of, I know that person's the Mason because when they were called on, they were moving heaps more than at any other point in the night, kind of thing. That's all gone. There's none of that.
Right. So I'm kind of interested now, like, because you've now played both versions and have a pretty decent idea of how they both work and their differences and their limitations, and where one's better than the other. Would you say that Werewolf could, it was designed with everyone being in the same room, and for that reason you're sort of things like metagaming are kind of encouraged. You're sort of meant to be drawing on different aspects that aren't totally just down to the cards. Would you say that it's kind of like ultimately a lesser experience playing it over the internet? Like, is it even really possible to get the full benefit of the game by playing it over the internet?
I can only speak for the way I did it, because I know that some people did it like when everybody was on their own video thing, and the app itself says night has fallen. It's a good idea to keep looking back at your phone every now and again and pretend to do a scroll here and there, because otherwise people can work out, all right, I was the troublemaker, because it shows you the order that everybody goes in. And I was just doing something, and now I'm looking up and everybody's chatting except this person's staring at their phone. So I've worked out that they're that, So there's a little bit of it, and I think it would work better if everyone's on an even playing field. Like, I had a good time doing it, but I felt a little bit removed looking at my computer screen while everyone else was in a room together. Because, we're losing bits of conversation as well, So for me, in the experience I just had, absolutely a lesser experience. And that's not talking about Werewolf versus One Night Ultimate Werewolf. Like, either way, you're getting less out of it trying to do it over a video chat. But I
It
think
sounds like
there are probably
overall
ways.
you've come down pretty positive on it, though.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I had a good time. I'm just answering JT's question. And
Right, okay,
Yeah,
okay.
there's something missing doing it over video, completely. But I think if you had the means to have because there are with the version I have, there's an app that reads the narration for you, so you don't need a moderator. And if you had the ability to have everybody on a video chat and could send that audio to everybody simultaneously, so you still had that kind of, it's up to everybody to have their eyes shut and do the right thing, and rah rah rah, then you probably wouldn't lose too much in the end. But that's getting pretty technically complicated for just a little fun party game.
I feel like I'm keen to give it a go online from what you've said. Beyond games, obviously the kind of isolation situation here is getting to the point where we don't necessarily have to do that. But considering that you're 1,000 kilometers away, even without isolation, then it could be a good option for some online. I guess we were talking the other episode, weren't we, about kind of card games that work virtually. So this could be a good one to give a go.
I mean, Shayla and I sent you guys a message like literally the night we did it, and everybody hung up because they were going home. I was like, we were straight away, hey, who's up? We got a really good way to play Werewolf online. Let's do it, And knowing, Paul, that I had it in my head that you didn't really like Ultimate, but knowing that I had that backwards, bring it on. Let's do it.
Even better.
But yeah, that's about it for me on that one. Paul, I believe it's not just Age of Empires you've been playing.
It's not. I've also been playing Project Zomboid, which has been mentioned many times on the show, but I wanted to come back to it again because things have changed quite a bit with that game. I have jumped into the beta patch, which has been updating for a very, very long time now. The actual base game hasn't received an update for about 18 months, but they kind of have a test beta patch running alongside that where everything is not always working exactly as it should. The game is technically still in early access, so it's kind of par for the course. And I've sort of stayed away from that in the past because I just like to play what was the sort of stable build of the game. But there's so much that has changed in this. I thought I'd jump in and give it a go. I'd also just read, I'd finished reading The Stand and I'd read The Road, which, two amazing post-apocalyptic books. So I was just keen for something in that setting. So I downloaded the beta patch and I've been playing that. And it is significantly different to how Project Zomboid was before. JT and I had played quite a bit of Project Zomboid before, and I guess, JT, you can sort of agree with this. I think that we had it pretty down as it was before this beta patch. When we started the game, we knew exactly what to do. We knew where to find stuff. We could take big groups of zombies, and early game was pretty routine. The sort of process from starting a game to getting into a very, very secure spot, we could kind of do it with our eyes closed.
Yeah, I feel like we sort of almost found the limit on the granularity of the game in a way.
Mm-hmm.
We sort of we knew when we had to start doing something else, or when I guess like where we had to go to get certain things. There wasn't a lot of guesswork.
Right.
And given such a detailed game, we had it pretty down. Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah, and it's almost like we had all the mechanics really worked out as well. Like there's all these things like I would always get a bladed weapon because I figured out perfectly how to do one-hit kills and things like that. And that meant that if I had like
Yeah.
10 zombies around me, all I had to do was separate them up enough to get one hit on each, and there we go. I could deal with 10 zombies.
Yeah.
And the big thing that has changed in this beta patch, which is it's not the kind of, it's not been updated to the main game yet, so you can't use it for multiplayer, which is why I've been kind of messing about with it and we haven't both been playing it. The big thing they changed is the animation system, and they've kind of gone from this sort of 2D system to more 3D models, and it has added to the game what last episode we dubbed weightiness, which we're now coming back to here, because that's what has been added to the game. It's the same concept we were talking about. Your character has a momentum and an inertia now, which completely changes the way you play the game. Like I really could not have predicted that this would have such a far-reaching effect on everything, but your character is so much slower now, and everything makes a difference. So if you are wearing a lot of heavy clothes, you are slower to run, you are slower to swing your weapon. Before Project Zomboid, you could kind of do everything instantly. It kind of had that instant response time from a button press. So if you're halfway through swinging at a zombie and you need to run away, you just hit the opposite direction and your character does a 180 spin like on the spot and runs away. And that's absolutely not how it works now. If you're halfway through a swing with a bat and you suddenly notice another zombie near you, it's going to take you half a second to turn. You're a bit slow when you start running. There's so many little things in that animation system which just change everything about the game. And I find myself now being much more picky about what weapons I use, because a really heavy, slow weapon that's powerful is no longer like really useful, because you may not be able to get away from zombies. The one-hit kills that I got so good at with bladed weapons, they're not gone from the game, but they're either much rarer or you have to have a really high skill level to get them, which totally makes sense, right? You know, as a newbie in the apocalypse, you shouldn't be able to just, one hit stab zombies with knives, but it makes sense that if you survive for ages and leveled up that skill that you're able to do it. And I guess the biggest takeaway from all of this is that zombies are now so much more of a threat, and anything more than one zombie, and even just one zombie, is now something that is important, which, it sounds kind of ridiculous that that's a big deal, but the game had got to the point where a horde of 20 zombies was something you could handle, and now it's back to, if I round a corner and there are 3 zombies there, I have to kind of stop and check my surroundings and see what weapons I have and think about, how am I going to deal with this? How can I split them off one by one? And it's brought the fear back into surviving, which is what the game is about. It should be about that, so it's really cool.
Yeah, just on the zombies, I feel like the version that we were playing, so the normal version that's available now, they shouldn't be like as much of a threat at later game, but at early game, you can basically completely circumvent them. So I'm glad to hear that that's something that they've sort of addressed at this stage. Like, I'm happy for them to be an easy thing to get past when you're at like a massive high skill level, when, you can sprint, you've got like really, really good, weapon accuracy, things like that. That's like no issue with me. But yeah, the fact that traditionally they haven't been a threat at lower levels is sort of like isn't that the point of the game?
Yeah.
It's called Project Zomboid, and I think it quickly became, the developers sort of put all their effort and energy into these other parts of the game that had nothing to do with the zombies, like cars and, try maybe a bit too much world building and not really getting back to the core mechanic of the game, which is like the zombies are here to give you a problem. And so now it sounds like they've sort of addressed that.
Right. I think it's a good kind of way to do it after they've done that world building. After they've added in cars and all these other items and systems, to then kind of go, all right, now all that stuff is in. Let's go back and kind of change the base system so that zombies are threatening again.
Yeah.
There's a lot of other stuff that's kind of, it's just a bit tweaked. Like loot is rarer, and I sort of specifically played on the same settings I used before because I didn't want to, change something in the settings and have it be different. I wanted to see how those settings were changed with this patch, and loot is a lot rarer. Like I don't have cupboards full of canned food after a couple of days of the game, which you would have before. They've also added a lot more variations of items, and it's things like before in the game you just had an axe, and that was kind of it. Now you have the axe. You also have a hand axe, which is like a one-handed version, which is, it's smaller but it's quicker and it's not as heavy. You also have a wood axe, which is specifically for cutting trees, and it's all really interesting because it means that finding a specific item is now more meaningful. You don't just kind of find an axe and go, oh, there's all my tree cutting and zombie killing solved for the rest of the game. It's like, I found a wood axe, I can cut trees, but this isn't that good against zombies. And the other thing that has changed, which I think has been way overdue in Zomboid, is injuries are much more common now in the game. So you can fall over fences if you're sprinting, and if you're just sprinting in general and climbing things, because they've added kind of mechanics to climb those really high walls now. If you're sprinting or carrying heavy loads, then you'll trip over those things, you'll fall, and you'll get scratches. And I find myself constantly having to like disinfect and bandage wounds, which are not from zombies, which that's how it should be, in the game. Whereas,
Absolutely.
like when you and I were playing JT, we would go like 2 weeks in the game without ever having to use a bandage because we'd avoid zombies, we knew how to deal with them, and we'd never put ourselves in a situation where you can be hurt. Now it's like you gain injuries from doing things like that. You also gain injuries more often from just hard work and things like that if you're overexerting yourself. And it's sort of the survival aspects of the game are really kind of ramped up. And like the game I'm playing, I've barricaded off a little house. Like I've managed to build log walls around like the entrances so zombies can't get in. But every time I leave the house, really feels like a big deal. And when I have to go into the center of town where all the shops are, where I know there's really good items, like that is difficult. In the game I'm playing, I have died twice already, and just respawned a character and taken them back to the same house. But that wouldn't happen in Zomboid before. Like I just find a house and then charge into the center of town and grab all the good stuff I needed. Now it's like I specifically plan like, all right, I'm going to go there and I'm going to loot this exact store and I'm going to sneak the whole way because I can't afford to pull a crowd of 10 zombies. That would just be the end of me. And JT, we had that experience of playing at night once the power went off in our game. I have a couple of times by choice gone looting at night because I know that I won't attract as many zombies, and I never ever would have done that in Zomboid before. So it's really changed the game quite a lot for me.
That's quite cool. Sorry, Timmy. I just wanted to say, like, that was... It's really cool how they've actually, it makes sense that you would get injured from things like exerting yourself trying to do some kind of athletic thing, like going over a fence, especially when they've now brought in that momentum aspect. And that's kind of like, that's what would happen in real life. If you're running into it, going to run over a fence, the chances are you're probably going to stack a little bit. Even if you don't stack it, you're going to get a bit injured. Maybe you'll scratch yourself. Like, just makes sense, right?
It does.
I was just going to say, like, it sounds like they've made a number of, a series of not insignificant, but not massive changes that have resulted in the feel of the game being much more like what the theme demands, you know? And I think that's really cool. I think that sounds like huge improvements based on like a little bit of tweaking, which is like really great. And the kind of thing you want to see from a game that has ongoing development, you know? Like it's good to see that they're not afraid of making like substantial changes for the betterment of the game.
Yeah,
Totally.
Like the animation system is probably that's the big change. Like that's the one that when you start playing, you're like, okay, this looks and feels different. But everything else, like they are on their own, they're insignificant. You know, they're things that it's a tiny little change that you wouldn't even notice. But once you go in and all of these things are working at once, the way they interact with each other, you know, it's like you injure yourself more often, but loot's rarer, so you can't find medical supplies. And zombies are so much more dangerous, so you have to go into town to go to the hospital to get those medical supplies. But it's such a more risk-reward decision to do that now. And when all these things start to play into it, it's the game just becomes so much more interesting.
Going back to what you sort of just brought up then, Timmy, about it being the theme of the game. The theme of the game, for anyone who hasn't played, and I think we've mentioned it before, is that when you start a game, the first thing that comes up is a little message and it says, these are the end times, this is how you die. And so the game is sort of, in a way, it's about how you die. And I think we lost that when we were the last sort of game we were playing, Paul. You know, you kind of tend to lose that feeling of that happening. It's sort of more of like, you know, it might happen down the future at some point, but you never really, you know, every time we went out, we never really sort of felt that much of a threat. It was more of just like, something might happen, but probably not. You know, we've kind of got everything down pat.
Right.
Whereas now it sounds more like, you know, you're leaving their house and you're like, all right, is this how I die? As opposed to it sort of being like, when am I going to die? You know, it's like, it sounds like it's really, you know, each outing is going to be much more of an event, much more to that theme of like, this is possibly how it all ends. You know, we need a little bit of food. We might die now.
Yeah, like I had a situation where this is another thing that's changed is cars are now much more commonly in a bad state when you find them, whereas previously probably 9 times out of 10 if you found a car and you had the key, it was working. Now it's much rarer to find a car that works, so things like the mechanics still matter. I found a car that worked. I took it back to my house, but it was very low on fuel. So I had a map of the area, so I figured out where the petrol station was. And so my mission one time was, all right, I got to go to the petrol station, refill my car and fill up these gas bottles, or these sort of petrol cans so that I have some supplies. And I died doing that because I put on all my really heavy gear that had protection from bites and stuff, which is a whole nother new system I'm not talking about. But it slowed me down so much that things went a bit wrong at the petrol station. I got a bit of a group of zombies on me and I couldn't deal with them fast enough and I got overrun and I got killed. And that would have been such a routine thing in Project Zomboid before this patch. It would have just been drive your car there, kill all the zombies, fill up with petrol, drive back. And it turned into my character dying, which it's what it should be.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, before, right? You know, you barely even really spare much of a thought for the zombies unless there's a huge horde. But, you know, I mean, we've all sort of grown up watching different sorts of like zombie adaptations in the media, things like Dawn of the Dead or Walking Dead. And, you know, a lot of those series get those sorts of scenarios, right? Where it's like, all right, guys, we got to go to the petrol station and get some petrol. And it is, you know, a whole episode can be about that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what I wanted for Project Zomboid. But I think obviously it lost its way a little bit, not necessarily in a bad way, but obviously they just had such a huge list of things they wanted to put in the game that they couldn't really get back to that core mechanic. So it sounds like they're sort of really starting to tackle that head on now, which I'm really, really pleased to hear. Project Zomboid devs, if you're listening to this, please, please, please release it onto the primary branch so me and my friend Paul can play together once again.
Right. So this is the last point I wanted to add, is that this new beta patch is amazing. The game is so much better. I'm not playing it anymore because it's only single player, and eventually this will get a proper full release, and then we can play it together. So I have enjoyed it so much that I've decided to put it down and stop and just wait for it to get a proper release onto multiplayer servers so that we can have a go, because there's so many little things that I kind of want to discover this with you. You know, I want these adventures to be with someone else, and all these little things they've added. It's so much more fun when you do it with someone else. So yeah, I'm having such a great time with it that I'm not going to play it anymore.
Yeah, glad to hear. And I'm really, really looking forward to getting into that version as well.
Yeah, that seems like a bit of a blow, you know, all these great things, and now you can't enjoy it in the way you like enjoying it. But, you know, sounds like it's for the better, just as long as they are still barreling towards that full release.
Can we still blame coronavirus for this? Probably not, but I'm going to anyway.
All right. Well, I suppose we have all gotten our fair share in there in terms of games played. But as always, we're going to finish up by taking a look at what we're hoping to get played by the next time we record. So, JT, what's on your radar?
I'll be continuing with the Crysis series. So I got the whole series on the on Origin, and so I'll be going through those. Probably will finish those before the next pod because I don't think they're huge games in terms of time. But after that, I'm actually going to be jumping into Assassin's Creed 3 because that's a series that I have been very, very slowly chipping away at when I can get my hands on the games. And
I was just about to ask if you had abandoned Assassin's Creed.
Jumping
into Crysis.
See, I was going to ask if you've abandoned Doom.
Yeah, no, I haven't. I will be jumping into Doom at some point as well. But you see, I burn myself out so quickly when I'm sort of just like, just like slamming a game. So I will get into Assassin's Creed 3. I'm actually really, really interested to play the take on that because I think it's set during the Civil War, possibly. You guys might know.
Revolutionary War.
Okay, right.
Or like War of Independence kind of thing.
Yeah, right. Okay. So yeah, I'm looking forward to jumping into that. So I'll probably get into that after Crysis and then probably a bit of Doom, but that's way down the track. That's sort of like probably pod after this one. So a pod after next, sorry. Yeah, that's probably what
I'm interested to hear what you think of 3 because I actually quite liked it. I know it doesn't have a great reputation among.
Yeah, isn't it where people sort of consider the series where they're like where the wheels started to fall off a little bit? Is that kind of
where got a lot of glitches and bugs on release, which I think was when people started going, "Oh, come on! Like, what are they doing here?"
Yeah,
well, I mean, I'm playing it a fair bit down the track, so maybe that's all been fixed. But I mean,
yeah, I never had any technical stuff with that one, but like, it's definitely the one where sort of critical opinions started to kind of waver. But I really liked it because I liked the setting. I've sort of always liked the modern ones a bit more, and I actually quite liked the frontier part of the game, which is sort of like it has sort of towns in an open area, and I'm kind of interested to see what you think because I feel like it's a very different vibe. It's not as vertical as other Age of Empires games, and I kind of like that change of pace. But yeah, interested to hear what you think.
I'm assuming you mean Assassin's Creed games, not Age of Empires.
That's all I can think about is Age of Empires.
Yeah, it's just on the mind. You break up in a sweat in the middle of the night. Oh my god, Age of Empires.
Break up in a sweat.
But that's about all will be exploring for the next week or so. How about yourself, Paul? What are you going to be getting into?
I have just started, and I'll be continuing to play Marvel Spider-Man, as it is officially titled. We have talked a lot about this game in the past. We talked about it on an episode, and we had a whole Disc and Dice expansion where we went real deep on this one. So I don't know how much we'll really talk about this, besides sort of Timmy and I sharing our comic book nerd thoughts on it.
Yeah, we're going to talk about it. We'll be talking about.
But yeah, I've started playing that, and I'm going to keep going with that, and that's probably the big one for me before next episode.
Well, I have been jumping into. I downloaded this one for the kids and then discovered that it's just so much fun. So me and Shayla have been absolutely smashing Lego Jurassic World. Because even though it's called Lego Jurassic World, you fire it up and it starts doing the Jurassic Park storyline. So all of a sudden I was into it. So
That's cool.
yeah, and we clocked that thinking it was just, oh cool, they've added Jurassic Park, and it unlocked Lost World. So like the sequel. So started playing that, and so I'm really enjoying that. The Lego games are just good fun, so I'm keen to talk about them in general. But yeah, so Lego Jurassic World. And I've also been playing heaps of a mobile game called Magic Spell Slingers, which is Magic the Gathering's latest mobile app. And I've played a bunch of their mobile games recently, actually, and this one to me is so much more appealing than anything they've done recently. And I've been really enjoying it. But I've only had it a couple of days, so keen to play it a whole bunch more, really get into it, and then report back.
I'm interested to hear about that. We talked before about how I played their just digital version of Magic quite a bit and really enjoyed it. So I'm interested to hear what else they're doing because I had no idea it existed.
Yeah, this is on Android. It says early access, so I don't know if it's even on anything else yet.
Right.
But yeah, that'll about do it for episode 35. JT, you're officially a member of the podcast now, having been on more episodes than you weren't. So
Does this mean Paul will honor my requests for different sound bites to add in? Like say for instance a celebration noise right now? Only I don't know right now. I'll listen back to the pod. Maybe it'll be in there, maybe it won't.
I hope Paul records himself like blowing a single like party whistle, just like once. Take it, JT. But yeah, if you want to get in touch with us, we didn't have any listener mail this episode, but we normally try our best to get to everything that gets sent our way. You can get in touch with us, discanddice@gmail.com. We are at Disc and Dice on Twitter. Those are probably the best spots to get at us on. But you can also get in touch with us on Facebook. Just search Disc and Dice. We're also now on Instagram, Disc and Dice Podcast, as well as Disc and Dice on YouTube. So if there's anywhere you think we should be that we're not currently, let us know. If there's any questions we can answer, shoot them in. Other than that, we will be back in a couple of weeks to talk more games.
Games.
Games.